I wondered if we could start at the beginning in terms of what inspired you to start the Caledonian Braves and what your kind of original vision was for the club.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. So the Caledonian Braves is an offshoot of what is called today Edusport Academy. So I used to play professional football when I was younger. I use that term quite loosely. I was probably a failed footballer, if you like. I thought I was a good player until I signed professionally. I realised I was pretty average, but I had the opportunity to go to America on a scholarship. I studied in New York and then I studied in Florida. And the opportunity in America changed my vision and my outlook in life, because I realised that any project that combines sport, education and travel is something that's very worthwhile. When I came back from America, I ended up in Paris, as you do. And I decided to open up my first business called Edusport USA, which was essentially helping young French footballers find scholarships in America, similar to what I'd done myself. And that evolved into Edusport Academy, which is a private football academy, which still exists today in Glasgow. And the idea behind that is to bring young footballers from France primarily into Glasgow to combine sport, education and travel. After a couple of years of having Edusport playing friendly games against professional clubs, I thought it'd be a nice idea to try and get the guys into a league where they could actually play for points and it could be some skin in the game, if you like. And at that point, you're faced with a choice. Do you go juniors? Do you go under 21s, under 18s, amateur? And I thought, you know what, if we're going to do it, let's try and do it right. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say in Scotland. And I looked at the pyramid system. And at the time of the pyramid system, there was the south of Scotland and there was the east of Scotland, was the lowest tiers of the pyramid. It's changed slightly nowadays. But I thought, let's try and get into the pyramid. So we applied to get into the South of Scotland League because there was only one division. In the East of Scotland, there was two before the Lowland League. We pitched up at the AGM, explained what we were trying to do. And the gentleman in the South of Scotland AGM actually voted us into the league, which gave us a fantastic opportunity to go from being a private football academy into actually being a football club. We then went, and that was fine initially. We played games in the league. We actually won the South of Scotland League Cup. And in fact, I can just show you this Blue Peter style. This is so we won that. That we actually won that 2 years in a row, and that trophy was actually displayed in the National Football Museum in Hampden because it documents contemporary football history, because it was won by a team of French footballers. All was fine and well until we won the league. And we became the first club in the history of Scottish football to be promoted from Tier 6 to Tier 5, which is the Lowland League. And that was, as you know, on paper, that's brilliant. You know, you win the league, get promoted, but that gave me a real headache because Edusport Academy, the players come over in September. It's an academic programme. The league starts in July. And quite simply, the standard of the league in the Lowland League is superior to what we had experienced in the south of Scotland. So we started bringing in Scottish players. We started paying them a little bit expenses and different things. And we thought, you know what, this is financially unsustainable. So we need to try and find an alternative to that. And that's when I decided that it would be good to separate Edusport Academy from the club. Keep the Edusport Academy as the private football academy and develop a new football club. And then the $1 million question, how do you go about doing that?
And how did you go about doing that?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that one out, to be honest. But
right.
So, I mean, the challenge in Scottish football, I mean, anyone who's watching this, if you're familiar with Scottish football, you'll know for sure Rangers and Celtic, okay? So on the west coast of Scotland, Rangers and Celtic, I don't know the figures, it'd be a good stat to try and pull it, but it's probably about 80% of people are either Rangers or Celtic fans. And that's not even mentioning Motherwell, Hamilton Accies, St Mirren, Kilmarnock, you know, just across the Central Belt, you get so many football clubs. So how does a brand new football club with no fans, no infrastructure, if you like, no history, and not only that, to compel the misery, actually coming from France, how do we compete? Okay, so my thought process was today, if you have a community club, you would think it's a club that serves a local geography around that club. My thought process was with internet, social media, apps, a community club can be global. It can be literally anybody, anywhere in the world that shares the same ideas, the same vision, the same values, the same hopes, aspirations. So I thought, let's try and create a community club, because there's no way that we can compete in and around Glasgow for fans who are already supporters of another club initially. Obviously, the medium to long-term plan is that we can do that, but initially. And also, quite simply, because owning a football club is fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of stress. But I'm quite limited in what I can do with the club on my own. And I thought it would be much more fun if we can actually share the football club with others. So that's when we come up with this idea back in the day called Our Football Club. And the idea was to replicate like a kind of socios model that you see at Barcelona, where fans would pay a £25 fee, and then they would have the rights, if you like, to actually vote on a new name change. So we went through all of that process, set up a website, set up an app, voted. We had 800 people initially that bought into the £25 membership scheme, and they voted on Caledonian Braves as the new name. So that was therefore then separation between Edusport Academy and Caledonian Braves. So that's kind of where we were for a while. And then to take that a little bit further, we said, okay, let's try and do Reg CF, which is crowdfunding, and let's try and sell shares in the club to raise a bit of capital, create a community around the club, and kind of, if you like, become a little bit of a disruptor in Scottish football and prove that there are other ways to own a football club that is not necessarily traditional in a board of directors, average age 65, or a rich billionaire. You know, what I wanted to do is give football back to the fans for the blue collar worker and say, you know what, for $100 you can have a bit of skin in the game. And that's where we are today.
Thanks very much. That's a great overview. So, as you say, that is unique in Scottish football, the ownership model that you have, and it's different from the type of traditional fan ownership models that we've seen, perhaps with St Mirren and Motherwell, etc. So, I wondered if you could perhaps explain how that works in practice at Caledonian Braves.
Yeah, well, I guess what I should say is a caveat to that. There is actually more and more clubs that are fan owned. You know, like Hearts, Motherwell, Stirling, Albion, one of the first ones, St Mirren. And generally speaking, unfortunately or fortunately, if you like, it's often the fans that have to bail out the club because it's been mismanagement, financial mismanagement, or the fans who are always going to be the custodians of the club that have been disillusioned by the way the club has been run. So they've come in, usually more often than not, to try and save the club. Where Caledonian Braves is very different, and it's a nuance, but it's extremely important, is I am the founding owner of the football club. So everything that we do, it comes from a good place, and there's a real sense of legitimacy behind it. It's not just because there's no conflict of interest, there's no existing fan base. It's actually me just saying, hey, this is my club, and I'm going to share it with people. So that's kind of where we are. So I guess to bring you forward up to speed to today, the idea behind creating this global community seemed quite far-fetched. You know, when I came up, the idea is probably a good few years in the making. You know, it's only been the last couple of years that this actually came to fruition. In fact, we just actually closed the WeFunder campaign just a couple of weeks ago. But we put the club on a platform, a Reg CF platform called WeFunder, where people around the world could invest in the club for as little as $100. Initially, I thought if we could, you know, make a couple of $100,000, that would be impactful. It wouldn't be an embarrassment. It would cover like expenses, if you like. And fast forward to today, and we have owners. We have over 9,000 owners from 55 different countries, and we've raised over $2.7 million, which is significant amount of money for a small club in Tier 5 of Scottish football.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, Chris. Actually, just for the context of the people watching, what will that level of finance enable you to do in terms of the development of the club? You know, relative to where you are in that pyramid.
Well, again, I guess it depends on how ambitious you want to be, or how cavalier you want to be. I often say $2.7 million is a lot of money, but it's quite quickly misspent, like anything, you know. And I joked that I was on the Price of Football podcast, and I joked with that level of money, I think I could maybe go on a holiday for 2 weeks this year as opposed to the one, you know. But some people didn't realise it was a joke, so stay away from it. But no, I mean, listen, it's like everything else. I mean, the reality is, it seems like a lot of money, and it is. But the reality is, a football club is one of the most difficult businesses probably in the world to first to become profitable and certainly even sustainable. Because you have something in football or professional sport, if you like, that you don't have in other walks of life, which is passion, ambition, and people dream. You know, and generally speaking, that's where sometimes the heart for many clubs rules the head, and that's why you see some clubs, you know, overreaching, overspending, because they dream of promotion, or they think if we can just maybe get in an extra striker who's going to score us those goals, that gets and more often than not, it doesn't necessarily work out, you know. So I always say that you have to be ambitious, of course you do, but you have to try and be intelligent with your ambition. And I guess the rule of thumb is the more money you have, the more opportunity you have of promotion, whether that's in the Lowland League or whether that's in the Premiership in England or any other league in the world. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with human beings, it's not exact science, and it doesn't always necessarily work out like that, you know. So there will be, I mean, now we're in a position we're saying, what do we do with this money? How do we become sustainable? How do we manage our ambition remaining sustainable? and improving infrastructure off the park, making sure we get the right product on the park, and making sure that in 5 years' time, I'm not the founding owner of a club that spent $2 million to be in the Lowland or the West of Scotland League, you know.
Yeah. So you've mentioned the challenge there. That's obviously quite a sum of money that you've got, and as you say, the approach you want to take is how do you make that a kind of sustainable? How do you make the club more financially sustainable going forward? What kind of things do you have in mind as to how you want to achieve that?
Well, ultimately, we have to, like any club, we have the same. I mean, what we do have now that we didn't have a year ago is 9,000 donors, you know. So, okay, we don't have a lot of people coming to the games at Alliance Park, you know, maybe 150, 200, 250 people. But that's probably the same as most average attendances across Tier 5 and Tier 6, more or less. I know you get Pollock and Clydebank, big clubs, 800, 900,000, great, good on them, you know. But in terms of, like, if you were to go to, like, a Berwick Rangers Cowdenbeath game, the average attendance probably wouldn't be any more than 300, I would have thought, you know. So we're in that kind of level. But what we do have is an active community around the club. We have 9,000 donors, but also we have access to some of the most amazing intellectual capital that a Tier 5 club in Scotland should be nowhere near, you know. And actually, we're actually developing we just put applications for non-execs and an advisory board. We've had over 100 applicants, and some of the applicants I'm reading them. I can't believe the quality of some of the folk that are applying for this, which is, again, fantastic. To answer your question, how do you become sustainable? I think what we have to do is generate, diversify revenue streams. You know, we can't sit on our laurels and say, yeah, we have this money, let's just use that. That would be absolutely foolish. You know, things like sponsorship, creating worthwhile partners, being of benefit to the community, the local community, and of course, winning games of football. You know, sometimes the best way that you can serve your community is just by winning games of football. So these are things that we're working on. We're working on setting up a charity as well to serve the local community, aligning our values with potential partners, potential sponsors, and looking for ways that we can add additional income streams to the club.
So those 9,000 fans that you've now got, 9,000 owners that you've got that have bought into the club and your vision for the club. Do you have any challenges in terms of engaging them, and how do they actively participate within that, you know, ownership structure?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, that I often joke about this. It used to be like just me and Ricky Waddle, who's the head coach, the manager. It used to be after a game, I'd pick up the phone and have a chat, and you know, now we have 9,000 people that we're all accountable to, which is great, you know, and that's fantastic. It comes with a bit of pressure, but like I've said before, it's a privilege, you know. We try and a couple of things we do. We try and create content as best we can with the resources that we have in terms of, you know, behind the scenes, getting to know the players, so that the owners, for the most part, 99% of them being out with Scotland, and get to know the players. We also have a Discord channel, you know, where people can keep up to date with everything that's going on in the club. We put votes in there. We do regular updates, and for the most part, folk have just been so positive towards the project. And again, I love Scotland. I absolutely love Scotland. But any pushback that I've had from anywhere, it's been from Scotland, and it's been from fans of other teams, which I guess is a good thing. You know, I think that's probably, you're doing something right when you're getting criticised by fans of other teams. But I think that the fact that we are allowing people to come into the club, become owners, be part of it, and be part of this community, being ambitious, I think people have really responded well to that, you know, and I think if you're honest, if you're transparent, and if you do things for the right reasons, it saves you from a multitude of sins. You know, I think as long as you're honest with people, you're transparent, and you show that you're doing things for the right reasons, people can forgive a lot of errors, you know, and that's kind of where we are. I mean, even if you go down to the basics of when people invest in the club, they get perks at a certain level. Supposed to get a kit at $500. Some people have waited over 9 months for a kit because our kit manufacturer, like Cox Sportif, went into administration, and it's just been a catalogue of problems. But you know, most people are just, you know, they're pretty laid back about that. They're pretty, you know, they're pretty understanding, and that's just because we're being honest and transparent with them, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You mentioned there some of the criticisms you've received or kickback you've received has come from other perhaps voices within Scottish football. How do you go about being innovative within that environment? Obviously, this has been pretty innovative, idea of trying to break that status quo and doing something different and challenging the norms. I mean, is that a difficult situation, environment to work within? Have you come up across anything like that?
No, not really. I think just the usual, just on X, and you put something, people comment. But I mean, it is what it is. Most people, generally speaking, I think most people recognise ambition. Most people. I mean, obviously, fans of other clubs will always criticise fans of other clubs. That's part and parcel of Scottish football. Um, but I think generally speaking, anybody. I mean, if you look at how far we've came from Edusport days, when we were Edusport, we were criticised. Oh, it's a French team. Who do they think they are? It's not even a football name. They don't have a ground. They don't have this. They don't have that. We've had to overcome all of those things in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I think that we've established ourselves as a well-respected Lowland League team. I think quite simply because we've stood the test of time. We've got good coaches, play a decent standard of football. But at the top end of the league this season, we've had some really good results. Ricky Waddell's a really good coach, UEFA Pro coach. I think he may be, and don't quote me on this, but I think he's the only UEFA Pro coach in the league out with the guest clubs. So we are trying to do the right thing, and I think people generally, I think they recognise that, if I'm being honest, but you always get that pushback, I think, which is a good thing. When people are not talking about you, then that's probably the worst thing, isn't it? If people are not taking notice of what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. And then last question for you then. What's kind of next for the Caledonian Braves, both on and off the pitch? What are the next steps?
3 points on Saturday. That's the next. I guess improve. I get the old cliche, improving year upon year, but it is. I mean, we've always been a kind of mid-table team. This year, pushing for promotion. It looks like East Kilbride will win the league, quite deservedly so, because they've been the best team over the course of the season. But for us to be up in anywhere near the top 2 or 3 is real progress for us. So it's how we can continue to build upon that. There's a real. I know again, it's really cheesy and easy to say, but there's a real good culture at the club. Ricky Waddell's done brilliant to create that. The boys are actually coming to Paris next week. We're playing a trophy called the Phoenix Trophy. We played in Hamburg, and we play in Paris. And if we win this week, we go to Italy for the final. These are all really exciting things. So on the park, it's just about continue to progress, get that winning mentality. The majority of our squad are quite young, so that comes with age as well and experience. And I think off the park, it's like I mentioned before, we're looking to put in place a leadership structure that can take a bit of pressure off me and support me and guide me, if I'm being honest, because it's difficult on your own. We'd like to maybe try and bring in a commercial director as well, someone that can help drive, finances. And I guess the big one for us is ultimately at some level, we'd like to try and develop our own stadium. And that's something that we're looking at as well. So that's maybe something for another day, but that's certainly in our thought process, is building our own stadium.
Very exciting. Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate that.